Share a bit more about your thinking around the levels of impact in a system? And I know at the Global Alliance, we've been using this impact matrix, but I've been really thinking about it when I've been working on the compass about how those levels are so multifaceted, from how are we changing an individual person's heart and mind who's a part of the alliance, to how are we changing the, you know, the directives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I mean, those are like, you couldn't imagine more vastly different levels of intervention. And yet we do want to play in that complex space of levels of impact and levels of systems change. So I wonder if you want to just talk a little bit about that, Michael. I'd be curious to get some of your insights.
It's really important, and the principle that undergirds those different levels that's emerging around a theory of transformation, which the Global Alliance has, is connectivity. That it's the it's not being engaged in those different levels as closed systems at different levels, but it's connecting them together. It's looking for where the connections can be strengthened among different players at different levels, creating the synergies and critical mass that comes from those interrelationships. And that's the way systems get transformed, through the strengthening of relationships across different levels and understanding again that variability. The I'll share a cautionary tale in this regard around evaluation that may illuminate that example. Jesse Jackson just died in February, the great civil rights leader. And Jesse, in the early in his career, established a program for youth called Push Excel that was aimed at African American Black youth, helping them become more responsible and more achievement oriented, and building community around them. He got money from philanthropy, from major foundations, Rockefeller and Ford, and from the government, and began to have communities around the United States. There were some 20 communities where he worked with local people to figure out what they wanted to do for youth in those communities. And he worked with local Black churches, with policymakers, with people on the ground, different levels of engagement. The federal government commissioned an evaluation of Push Excel, and they came in and saw what was going on in the different communities. And because the different communities and levels were connecting together and empowered to figure out what they needed to do, there was no singular program with outcomes. The evaluators went in having defined a program as having a logic model and predetermined outcomes that everybody was working towards. Their conclusion was that Jesse Jackson did not have a program. What that led to was the accusation that he had misused the funds to support cronies rather than to do work, because they didn't have a frame of diversity and connecting different levels. Their frame was a program, has uniform outcomes, and everybody's working for the same thing and doing the same activities. Jesse's career was haunted the rest of his life when he ran for president as having been a bad manager and having taken funds to do a program when he never did a program. The evaluation results followed him negatively throughout his career because of the predetermined idea that a program is a uniform, standardized thing, whereas Jesse understood that his programming was connecting levels, was connecting people in policy, in churches, in communities, and strengthening those connections around what will build character in young people to help them make a difference in their communities and their lives. There's a great review of that book done by one of our evaluators, Ernie House, who looked at the devastating effects from that negative evaluation. But actually, Jesse, ahead of his time, understood that change was about connecting levels, not just working at levels, but connecting them, strengthening them around basic principles. And in retrospect, Push Excel would be an early example of complex systems change instead of, as it was seen at the time, as a disaster that never delivered on anything. It's a rethinking of what constitute impacts and outcomes, so that when we're talking about Anna's issue around different levels and well, I talked about systems transformation and the theory of transformation being about changing relationships. Changed relationships are not typically thought of as outcomes. They're thought of
No.
as simply the process, and that they want to know, what did those relationships accomplish?
Yes.
Relationships are what the system is made up of. When you strengthen relationships, you're changing the system. When
Right.
you're adding capacity and power and resources and knowledge to relationships and their capacity to engage together with what needs to happen at a moment, the relationships are the outcome. And so one of the things that we often find with principles is that the the process is also the outcome. We have this distinction in logic models between process and outcome. So relationships are an activity, and the outcome is some kind of indicator. But where communities and systems and transformation happens is through changed relationships and interconnections, then helping people understand that is the change, and that what they do together is a function of those capacities and those relationships changes how we think about what system change is.
Mhm.